Hello, welcome to our series concerning the God's covenant in the Hebrew Bible. One of the central themes of the Hebrew Bible, often called by others as Old Testament, is the concept of covenant. A concept that's more than a legal agreement. It's about relationship. It's how God chooses to connect with the people, whether all the humanity, the people of Israel, the individuals like Abraham and David, and sometimes covenants in the Bible even describe agreements between human beings. The word for covenant is berit. Semitic root evidenced by the Akkadian word beritu, meaning bond, chain. A covenant is a binding relationship, not casual, not enduring, and deeply serious. This is the covenant. It's something serious and between two parties. This covenant is enriched by a related biblical word, legal, moral, emotional, such as Allah, to swear, shevuah, it means oath, Torah, instructions, emunah, faithfulness, as well as terms that speak about relationship like chesed, steadfast love, shalom, peace, and ahava, love. Together, they show that covenant is both duty and devotional responsibility mixed with love. A helpful modern analogy is marriage. Marriage is not just paperwork. It's a bond that is built on promise, loyalty, affection. It's a kind of relational commitment that a covenant involves. So marriage is a good symbol of covenant, and it's very used in the Bible. So how do we establish a covenant? In the ancient Near East, the most common covenant ceremony involved cutting an animal or more than one animal in two parts and walk between the pieces, raise a hand while swearing loyalty and fidelity to the covenant terms. This ritual was expressed by the phrase to cut a covenant, Karat Berit, which became the most common biblical phrase for establishing a covenant. Covenant has the context in the ancient Near East. And to fully understand biblical covenants, we must look at their ancient context. The Bible emerged in the same cultural environment as other ancient Near East civilizations and often reflects similar treaty forms. There are three main types of ancient treaties that help interpret biblical covenants. First of all, so you have these three here: Suzerain-Vassal treaties, Royal Grant treaties, Parity treaties. The first one, Suzerain-Vassal treaties. These are political agreements between the dominant ruler, the suzerain, and a subordinate ruler or nation, the vassal. The suzerain promised protection, while the vassal pledged loyalty and obedience. Breaking the treaty brought punishment. Scholars identify two main families of suzerain-vassal treaties. A shorter family that happened between the third and the first millennium, in the third and in the first millennium before the Common Era, before Christ, that were used by kingdoms like Akkad, ancient Akkad, Ebla, and the first millennium by the New Assyrians, the Babylonians. These treaties were very authoritarian. They emphasized, above all, obedience and included harsh curses for disobedience. Typical structure of this treaty, we have, first of all, the preamble, which identify the suzerain, his name, his possessions, then follow, after he's identified, the stipulations, the rules, the expectations that the suzerain had over the vassal. And after, they call witnesses. Usually the divine beings that were gods of the both sides were called to be witness to the covenant. And they end with curses. If you don't obey, they have severe threats of punishment for failure on the side of the vassals. This was the first family. Then you have a second family with longer treaty. These families came from the second millennium before the Common Era, before Christ. They were used mainly by the Hittites. These are a more relational kind of treaty. While they still require obedience, they highlighted the suzerain past goodness, involved also blessings. So the structure will be preamble, introduction of the author, the suzerain, the historical prologue. This is a new part, exists only in this family of treaties. They remind the vassal of the suzerain kindness for him, what he did in the past for him. Then come the stipulations, the rules, the expectations that the vassal should fulfill. Then we have the witness, also calling gods from both sides. Then we have a section of blessings and curses. And this is very interesting, because if you are obedient, you have rewards, blessings. But in case of rebellion, disobedience, then punishments. Then the last section that appears in some of these treaties, not all, but probably there are some what are missing because they are not complete, was a stipulation for public reading and preservation. Treaties were read aloud. From time to time, they were kept in a safe place so that it will not be deteriorated or spoiled. So, why does this matters? This different kind of treaties. When you look at the covenant at Sinai, from the book of Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, the covenant of Sinai followed the longer style typical of the Hittite treaties. This connection with the second millennium treaty practice supports the biblical narrative that the covenant of Sinai took place in the second millennium. It shows that the covenant of Sinai fits its ancient context and wasn't a later invention of someone. So these are the kind of vassal treaty covenants. Then we have the second kind, which is the royal grant. This is a kind of treaty where the king would give a reward to a loyal subject, the right to a property, a land, a noble position in the kingdom, which was usually designated as a house for him and for his family. This was a permanent, irrevocable gift. Even if the subject descendants became unfaithful, they might be punished, but would never lose the inheritance, the gift their ancestors received. This model, the royal grant, shed light on three major biblical treaties. First, the Noahic, or the covenant of God with Noah, Genesis 6 and 9. Then we have the covenant of God with Abraham, Genesis 15, 17, where you have the promise of land, descendant, global blessing to him. Then we have also the third one, which is this kind of royal grant, which is the covenant with David. David with his dynasty, unconditional covenant. So these are the main covenant that we have here. And Paul used this idea because Israel failed, but nevertheless, God never forfeit his covenant with the patriarchs. Then, when we come to all of this, we have the third kind of covenant, which are the last one, which are man-made covenant, the parity treaties. The parity treaties are between kings of equal status to promote friendship, peace, brotherhood, And the biblical examples of this is Abraham with Abimelech in Genesis 21, Isaac with Abimelech in Genesis 26, Solomon and Hiram, And the first king, we have this funny story of Ahab offering a brotherhood covenant to the king of Aram when he could win the battle and eliminate his mortal enemy. And, these are the kind of covenants we can understand. So what's this then imply for us? What's the biblical covenant? It's far more than legal agreement. A biblical covenant, a way of forming committed, enduring relationship, use the form of ancient treaties, but fill them with love, responsibility, faithfulness. From the Sinai Suzerain-Vassal model to the conditional royal grants to Abraham and David, the mutual party treaties between kings and the Bible, making peace. Yet, beyond this, covenant tells the story of a God who binds himself to a people through love, loyalty, and grace. Covenant shows us that God is not distant or abstract. He makes promises, keeps them, and calls people like you to a faithful relationship with him that will be personal and eternal. Today, God probably is calling you to enter in a covenant with him, and what response would we give to him?